All right, I'd like to introduce Pam Moon, who has traveled 22 hours from England to be here. She has a diverse background, beginning with a degree in English and history before training and working as a nurse. She later earned an MSc in health studies and pursued theological education at Wycliffe Hall, Oxford from 1998 through 2001. Alongside raising her family, she worked in parish ministry with her husband Phil, who was an Anglican priest. In 2008, she founded the Shroud of Turin exhibition, featuring life-size replicas by Barry Schwartz, using the shroud to illustrate the gospel story. The exhibition has traveled to various venues and was scheduled at St. George Cathedral, London, this past March 12th through April 21st. Let's welcome Pam. Yeah, you should get a green light.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. I must apologize for my presentation yesterday because it all looked a bit garbled. I chose a font which on my computer, a Mac, said was American typewriter. I thought, oh, that's great. It didn't work on that computer. So it all went all higgledy-piggledy. Bobby, bless her heart, has tried to rectify that. I'm going to talk about the folding patterns of the history of the shroud, and there are multiple folding patterns to get through. Okay, so where was the shroud from 33 AD to 1355 AD? We can say scientifically the shroud is a first century cloth and that it fits the gospel accounts of the passion and resurrection of Jesus. But in the UK, we have a program called Fake or Fortune. I don't know if you have it here. If you want to establish that a painting is done by Matisse, you have to have your history. You have to have your sources. You have to have your provenance. Where was it? Okay, this is a problem for medievalists with the shroud. Those who are anti-authenticity need to supply the 5 W's of history: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And they don't tend to do that generally. They can't give you a name as to who this person was that made the shroud or where they were. So they also can't answer how and when the shroud was damaged. For instance, the large water stain pattern, the diamond water stain pattern in the center of the chest, and the incense damage. Okay, I'm going to look at today at the large diamond pattern, the image of Edessa, the Holy Mandelion, the golden casket, which is the Limburg Staratiki, the Epitassios procession, incense damage. And I'm going to look at a lot of people who I believe were custodians of the shroud. So, Abgar, Constantine VII, St. Vladimir the Great, Michael IV, John the Orphanothropos, Harold Hardrada, and even Leif Erikson, who landed in Newfoundland in America. So let's get going. What's the history of the large diamond-shaped pattern? Can you see it's right here in the center of the chest? So to create that pattern, the shroud needs to be folded in 2 ways here, and then this is the largest stain, and it gets progressively smaller as you go down. It's probably a concertina pattern. Now, the diamond pattern across the chest here, the entry point for the water is the center of the diamond. And the damage depends on the shroud being stored vertically and the water coming in from the bottom. Okay, the Western medieval storage means of storage for cloth is horizontally in chests. Now, is this damage medieval? There's no known history of any water damage happening between 1355 in Liri and 1532 in Chambray. But this damage, I believe, is seen in art before 1355. So if you can have a look at this diamond pattern here, you can see that this is the Judith of Flanders Gospel, the 11th century. She's seeing the right-sided wound of Jesus here, and big long toes here, and this V-shaped pattern. You see it on the armlet of Frederick Barbarossa. You see again this diamond-shaped pattern on the chest. Now I'm going to argue, unlike Jack and Guy, for the image of Edessa as being the historical route for the Shroud of Turin. This is Ian Wilson's argument originally, and this is the folding patterns for the Holy Mandelion. It was folded into 8 tetradiplon, and the image here, well, let's go to the next one. You can see that the face image here fits with this. And John Jackson's raking light creases show that the shroud was once folded in that way. Let's just have a look here. There's multiple folds above the head and 4 folds here. These aren't quite visible. Okay, this is the Akbar legend, 10th century image. And this is the Holy Mandelion from the Synopsis of History by John Skylitzes. I'm going to be talking about this text a lot. It is the only surviving illuminated manuscript out of Constantinople at the point at which the Holy Mandelion, the image of Edessa, arrived in Constantinople. But it's a copy, so it's full of errors. It was probably made around 1130s to 1170s in Sicily. Okay, and this is the Emperor Romanos I kissing the image of Edessa when it arrives in Constantinople. Now, I've used as my source text this beautiful book by Vasiliki Tsomakta, where she's got the text alongside the pictures. So you can follow. There's 500 or more beautiful illustrations telling the history of Constantinople. And it's also now available online. You can find it online. Okay, so how did this diamond-shaped pattern happen? Well, the most obvious answer is storage in a clay jar, and water comes in from the bottom of the jar. Now, in Edessa, the river was called the Daysan or the Daisan, and it was known because it was a skipping or jumping river because it burst its banks numerous times, 204, 305, 415, until the river was diverted in the 6th century by the Byzantine emperors. Why did they do that? Now, the upland waters would contain contaminants like fulvic and humic acid from decomposing organic material. That material will end up in the corner of the radiocarbon dating. Now, have a look at the colour of the staining. It looks like water damage from flood water. And this interesting, it's a right-angle pattern here. I'm pressing the wrong thing here. Can you see? Normal water, if it comes from the top, would not cause that staining. It would not have that right-angled edge. Okay, this is the discovery of the image of Edessa. The height of the gateway is not that great. In old cities, they didn't have high gateways because it was more difficult to protect. And you can imagine that in a flood, the water might have reached that level if the shroud was hidden. Or conversely, the image might have been damaged in an earlier flood and then hidden to escape persecution. Now, what evidence is there that the shroud is the image of Edessa? Well, first of all, reproduction. There are numerous copies of the image of Edessa. Other possible shroud hypotheses, like the image of Camuliana or the image of Beirut, do not have this wealth of imitation. Google it, and you'll see. Here are some of the representations. Secondly, Ravenna mosaics. This is Justinian I, the young emperor here, who built Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And here is the Christ Pantocrator in that cathedral. But you wouldn't recognize that as Christ, would you? He's got short hair, apart from the cross around his head. He's no beard, no moustache. Now this is, in another church in Ravenna, this is the old Justinian I and a very shroud-like Christ. So something has happened during the reign of Justinian in which the image of Jesus changes. Now, this image here is the one that shows the Justinian, and you can see that he's got something called the tableon that he's wearing. And you can also see the Cairo on the shield of the soldiers. You can see the cross. I don't know if you can see it here. This is now, the cross has become what we traditionally see as the cross. And here is a thurible, an open-topped Byzantine thurible. We'll talk about that with the folding patterns for the incense damage. Okay, thirdly, the loros. I did some work with my lovely friend Joanne Bywater. The Byzantine emperors from Justinian I onwards, after the discovery of the image of Edessa, began to wear the loros. It represented the winding sheet of Jesus. One side was plain linen to represent the cross, the other was gold to represent the resurrection. So they knew that they had, that the loros is representing the winding sheet of Jesus. This is not a face cloth. It's representing the winding cloth of Jesus. Now here's a Justinian coin from the 2nd century. And you can see here, this is the first representation of what it looks like to wear the loris. Here's Justinian II with a loris. Can you see it's got a pattern down it? It goes down his shoulders and round his body. This is Theophilus, the emperor from the iconoclastic emperor. And you can see him sitting on his golden throne with his loris. Fourthly, it's landscape, not portrait. It's shown as a landscape image, whereas a painting would be shown portrait by and large. Fifthly, the trellis pattern. Can you see that when the Holy Mandelion was drawn, it often had like a trellis pattern here by the side of Jesus' head? Can you see? Later in Constantinople, that trellis pattern goes behind the throne of Jesus Christ in glory. It's the same pattern. You see it here on the Karamian tile, which was brought to Constantinople in 966, and on the Mandelion. So the Mandelion's on the left, the image of Edessa on the left. They are the same cloth. The image of Edessa and the Holy Mandelion are the same cloth. It's just that it was called the Holy Mandelion after the 11th century, 10th, 11th century. And you can see this trellis pattern. Here it is on the baptism of Boris I in Bulgaria from the Skylitzes. You can see the figure of Jesus here has this same trellis pattern. And I wonder if this marking here is actually the root, the muse for this pattern. And the marks of the whip inside it are the muse for what's inside there. Okay, Byzantine iconoclasm. If the shroud was in Constantinople, why was there a period of iconoclasm? Why did they want to destroy images of Jesus if they had the shroud? I think it needed to be outside of Constantinople at this point. And the iconoclasm is extreme. If the shroud had been in Constantinople, would it have survived? The image of Camuliana was apparently destroyed in this iconoclasm, according to Wikipedia. I don't always have to agree with Wikipedia, but here we go. So the first iconoclasm was between 730 and 783. This is St. John Damascene, who was sent to Edessa to assess whether it's okay to worship, I won't use the word worship yet, but to venerate icons. And he wrote this: previously, God, who had neither body nor a face, absolutely could not be represented by an image. But now that he has made himself visible in the flesh and has lived with men, I can make an image of what I have seen of God and contemplate the glory of the Lord, his face unveiled. And as a result of this, there was a council, and they removed the iconoclasm. But then here comes the second iconoclasm, between 814 and 843. This chap here is called Ioannis Grammaticos. He was patriarch, and he's seen rubbing the face of Jesus out of the Holy Mandelion. Can you see? And in the side here, you can see Jesus has a wound to the side. This is the face of the Holy Mandelion, the image of Edessa. And he's rubbing it out. When he was exiled later, he sends a deacon up some steps to rub out the faces on the icons. Now, these are a few stories from the Skylitzes about how bad the iconoclasm was. Michael II ordered his son Theophilus to slay the iconophile bishop by beating him with oxen sinews. The cruel Theophilus tortured and exiled the Abramites. They died as a result of their whipping. Theophilus lost his patience and ordered the Graftoy brothers to be beaten, the verses composed by him tattooed on their foreheads. Now, the Emperor Theophilus was, just like his father, Michael Travelos and Leo V, against the veneration of icons and severely punished the iconophiles. He ordered that no icons could be painted at all, because no one could depict the truth. All the holy images were therefore removed from churches and were substituted by pictures and animals and birds. The holy relics were thrown in the marketplaces and salted. The prisons were full of monks, bishops, priests, and icon painters. The iconophiles were not allowed to come into the city, so the monasteries were filled with them. This iconoclasm is quite serious here. But then it's restoration. After Theophilus died, Theodora, his wife, seen here, restored the veneration of icons. And it says here, she already secretly worshipped them. We get this construct coming through that the emperors worshipped the icons, and we'll come on to that in a minute. The Council of Constantinople restored the veneration of icons. Seventhly, an image not made by hands versus the idolatry of the emperors. This is Dame Professor Avril Cameron. She's a Byzantine scholar, worldwide importance. She works out of Oxford. And she wrote a paper in 1980, probably following Ian Wilson's book, in which she wrote there's no evidence before the 6th century for the shroud. The shroud is a 6th century painting. She went on, the addition of the picture is not an unfortunate accretion to be swept away by the historian, but the deliberate move in the Christianization process needing full appreciation. Explanations gave the picture and later the miraculous image its power in society. So the image of Edessa is not a miraculous image, it's just a painting. The emperors perpetuated the not made by hands myth for political ends to manipulate their citizens to become Christians. Okay, Professor Cheryl White and I wrote a reply, including various things. One of the arguments that it isn't the image of Edessa is that people will say, well, Eusebius went to Edessa, we didn't see it. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. If you went to Turin today, you wouldn't see the shroud. That doesn't mean to say it's not there. But this is the one I want to focus on today. The emperors risk their immortal souls on a painting. There's a tendency in academia to project the atheism of our age onto historical figures. And as we explore the lives of the emperors post-944, will you please assess whether you think that that is plausible? 8, some writings Gregory references. I mean, we've dealt with that elsewhere. There's a letter of Constantine VII. He sent to his troops a holy supply of water that had been consecrated with the relics of Christ's passion held in the palace. These relics included the precious wood of the cross, the sacred spargana, which is the swaddling clothes of Jesus, and the sindon, which God wore, the shroud of Jesus. Now, this is the arrival of the Holy Mandelion, and the text says that Romanos I worshipped it. Now, if this is the face of God, and if this is the blood of Christ, then that's not an idolatrous act, I would argue. And I think in Greek Orthodox thought that would be the case. So who was Romanos I? He was a common illiterate fellow, a military commander, and he sent a huge army to get the image of Edessa. He was later sent to a monastery by his sons who didn't want Constantine to become the emperor. So he got the image of Edessa out of Edessa. This is what he looks like in a coin. You can see he's a military commander, can't you? Okay, can we just look at his family for a moment? So this is Romanos, and he was the protector for Constantine VII, who was the legitimate emperor, but he was a young child when Leo died. Now, Romanos married his daughter, Helena, to Constantine VII, and also Romanos had a eunuch son called Basilicapenus, who was a great investor in art. Now, Constantine VII had a son called Romanos II who died young, but he left 3 children, Basil II, Constantine VIII, and Anna, the beautiful Anna, who married Vladimir the Great. Now, Constantine VIII's daughter took the throne, well, alongside her husbands, and she was called Zoe. She had 3 husbands, Romanos III, Michael IV, and Constantine IX. Are you staying with this? Does this make sense? I want to go through these people. Here's Constantine VII being blessed by Jesus at his coronation in 945. And here he is in the Skylitzes getting married to Helena. Here's son Romanos in a Romanos ivory being blessed by Jesus. Have a look at the loros that he's wearing here. It's got a definite pattern to it. Can you see? And this is the wedding in the Skylitzes. Now, Abgar V looks like Romanos, looks like Constantine VII. I think the image of Abgar holding the Holy Mandelion is based on Constantine VII. Now, this is the narthex mosaic, and I've tried to argue that actually this is Constantine on his knees before Christ after he's received the Holy Shroud he's overwhelmed by what he's seen, and he's on his knees. Other people argue that this is his father in repentance before Christ. But you can see here the trellis and Christ in glory with a shroud-like face. Going back to Leo, there's a large image of Christ in the dome of San Sophia, potentially. Can you see there's a huge Christ Pantocrator, not available to see anymore, maybe covered over, but it's likely that was there. So were these images all Constantine VII? Well, this is his coin. And have a look at this for a moment. Can you see that out of Jesus, here's Jesus, out of Jesus' hand is out of his shroud is his hand emerging. This is not a face image. This is 945. This is the hand of Jesus. The same again on the Harborville triptych, which is in the Louvre. You can see Christ reigning in glory. You can see he has the trellis behind his back, and you can see his hand emerging from the shroud in which he sits. Now, where was the shroud stored? Mark Guskin wrote, this wonderful linen cloth with the face of our Lord, marked by direct contact, is kept in greater veneration than the other relics in the palace, and held in such high esteem that it is always kept in a golden case and very carefully locked up. It was not open for anyone except the Emperor of Constantinople. I've argued for years that this is the case in which it was stored. This is called the Limburg Steiretiki, and it dates to 945 to 987, and it was created by Constantine Romanos and Basil Lecapenos. The relics inside the Limburg Steiretiki, among the relics were the swaddling clothes of Jesus, the spargana, and the winding sheet Christ was wrapped in when he was in his tomb. The shroud of Jesus is associated with this. Okay, so how big is it? Well, it's 28 centimetres by 45 centimetres on the Constantine bit, and the Basil Lecapenos bit is a bit bigger. And I think that just as the Constantine and Basil Lecapenos slid into each other, this box, this was the box into which that slid, into which they stored the shroud. So the holding pattern for the Limburg Steiretiki is like this. It's folded into 4 effectively, and then following the lines of the Holy Mandelion. Now the inscription says, Christ with this, on the Constantine bit, Christ with this formally smashed the gates of Hades. That's not about the cross. That's about something with which Christ came back to life. And Basil Lecapenos wrote this, he did not have beauty, the one suspended on the wood, yet Christ was complete with beauty. And in dying he did not have form, but he beautified my appearance, deformed by sin. So here is have a look again at this, this loris. It's got a 4 pattern across, with Christ emerging, his hand emerging. And the same on the Romanos, the second one. So what external evidence is there for the golden casket? Well, the image of the golden casket, and also Constantine VII's Book of Ceremony. He wrote a book about what ceremonies you should do in Hagia Sophia. So this is John the Aphonothropos. He's sending the Mandelion, the Holy Mandelion, the image of Edessa, to Constantine de Lassonos. What he's carrying is not a large casket. Can you see it's a golden casket? It's not large. It would fit the dimensions of the Steiretiki. And what was in the golden casket? The holy woods. You can see the holy woods. This is the Byzantine double-barred cross with the wood of the cross. And you can see that it also had the Holy Mandelion, Christ's autograph letter to Abgar V, and the icon of Mary, the Mother of God. Well, this is the arrival of the letter of Jesus to Abgar V. So Jesus wrote a letter to Abgar, and you can see here it's arriving, and Romanos III, who was the first husband of Zoe, is receiving it. Now, the next folding pattern I'd like to argue is for an epitassios procession. Constantine wrote this in the Book of Ceremonies. On Good Friday, go back. Go forward. On Good Friday, the emperor enters the sanctuary at Hagia Sophia in St. Sophia. Taking a censer, he scents the altar from all sides, and after changing the holy altar cloth, he places a purse on it. And then leaving the sanctuary, he goes to the chapel of the Holy Casket. Okay, so he's done something on the altar of Hagia Sophia with an altar cloth, and then he goes to the chapel of the Holy Casket. On Easter Saturday, he does the reverse. He comes from the chapel of the Holy Casket, and he goes back to the altar at Hagia Sophia, and he leaves loads of gold on the thing. Now, the changing of the altar cloth on Good Friday and Easter Saturday is an established part of Eastern Orthodox liturgy today. Normally done by the patriarchs and priests, it's associated with the carrying of the epitassios, or the winding sheet of Jesus. The epitassios is removed from the altar towards the end of Good Friday service and returned on Easter Saturday before the resurrection celebrations on Easter Sunday. Among the Orthodox, the winding sheet is known as the Greek name, the epitassios. Some suggest that it was inspired by the presence in Constantinople between the 10th and the 13th century of a shroud believed to be the one in which Jesus was buried. Here's some pictures of it, multiple pictures. So it was just shown the face, you don't see the whole body, you just see the front of the body. And on Easter Sunday, I won't go through this, there's a wonderful, Constantine describes putting on the loros, which was the winding sheet of Jesus, and going into the sanctuary at Hagia Sophia. And they wear the loros because it's of Christ representing, laying out for burial, and of gold for the splendor of this day, being struck by the rays of the sun at the resurrection of Christ himself. Now, this is the death of Constantine VII. At the burial site, it was the emperor's personal attendant, Basil Lacapenos, who took over. With his own hands, as is customary for the dead, he takes his all-holy body and winds him in the burial shroud in the manner of Lazarus. Now, is this an emperor who perpetuated a Christian myth, leading his population into idolatry? Or is he a holy emperor? Okay, the folding patterns for the incense burns. We'll go through this quite quickly. Incense burns, you can see that there are 4 different burns. It's happened before the Hungarian Prayer Codex, because you can see it there. And I have argued for years that this is the event in which it happens. 1036, because there was a drought and no rain had fallen for 6 months, the brothers of the emperor held a litany. John the Phonothrosis carried the Mandelion, Constantine carried Christ's letter to Adgar, and then this was mistranslated, George carried the Holy Shroud. And the procession went from the palace to the Blanchennai church. Well, thanks to Jack Marquardt and Janice Winchester, who wrote to Vasiliki, and she corrected the Holy Shroud bit. She said, I made a mistake there. It's not the Holy Shroud, it's the Spargana. But that means that, let's go back a minute, that the main thing being carried through the streets of Constantinople is the Holy Mandelion. Now, this is the only image in the Madrid Skylitzes of that event. You can see that it's a procession of the priests and the religious going to the church of St. Mary Blanchennai. I've argued for years that this image has been misclassified in the text, that this is the carrying of the Holy Shroud folded into 4 when it was damaged by incense, being guarded by the Varangian Guard. Now, the text says that it's the death of Leo V, but actually, this is the death of Leo V. He was hacked to pieces in a church. He's had his head cut off, his arm cut off. He was hacked to pieces and dumped in the snow. That was not a procession of the death of Leo V. But also, the army is the Varangian Guard. Without any question, this is the 6,000 troops sent to Constantinople, known as the Varangian Guard, or the axe-bearing barbarians. Now, David Professor, I had a correspondence with her, and she basically said, I don't believe that the large shroud was folded into 4 when it was damaged by incense, and the Holy Mandelion is only ever identified as a face cloth only. But Professor Judith Herrin, who's also a Byzantine scholar, took a slightly different view. Just a quick note on your query. In checking the text of the Skylitzes, there is no mention of the Varangians being involved in the dealing with the mutilated body of Leo V, nor are they mentioned in the most earlier chronicle. If this is an image of the Varangian Guard, it is clearly out of place in the description of Leo V's death. Now, I did a presentation on this in a conference in Brugge. This is Vladimir the Great, who sent an army to Constantinople, the Varangian Guard. Now, he is venerated here in Kiev, Novgorod, and Moscow. It's criminal that they are fighting each other today. They were once brothers. Now, this is the land of the Kievan Rus, and this is the Byzantine Empire. Now, he was awful. Vladimir the Great was awful. There's hope for all of us with gravity. I mean, this is his wife trying to stab him to death because he'd raped her, he'd killed her parents, he'd killed her family. He had 800 concubines. He was known as the great fornicator. And then in 980, he had a change of heart. And he sent his envoys to Constantinople and various places. And when they came back from Constantinople, they said they didn't know if they were in heaven or on earth. And he wanted to marry Anna. Do you remember Anna, who's the sister of Basil II? She didn't want to marry him. She said she'd rather die in Constantinople and marry this barbarian from the north. But she said, I will marry him on one condition, and that is that he becomes a Christian. So here is the baptism of Vladimir the Great in 988. And here is St. Sophia in Kiev, which he built. This is the Desis in St. Sophia in Kiev. It predates the Desis in Constantinople. This is a shroud image. This is St. Sophia in Novgorod, which was built by his children. And this is the Novgorod icon. This is a knowledge of the Holy Shroud in the Russian Kievan Rus in the 1,000 years ago. Now, John the Orphanathrosis carried the Mendelian. Is this John the Orphanathrosis? Let's have a look at this here. Is that him? Leading the procession with the Holy Mendelian, the image of Edessa. Well, who was he? Well, he was the chief clerk in the court of Basil II. And Basil was the grandson of Constantine VII. Do you remember? He was the chief court eunuch of Romanos III, seen here receiving the letter of Jesus to Abgar. And he was married to Zoe. And he sent the golden casket containing the image of Edessa, the Holy Mendelian, to Constantine de Lassanos. Why did he do that? Well, because Romanos III was murdered in suspicious circumstances in his bath. And here's the picture of that event. The same night, Zoe married Michael IV. A bit suspicious, isn't it? Here's Michael IV, good-looking young man, handsome, virile. And she married him. But Michael was John the Orphanathrosis' brother. And they had other brothers who were also eunuchs, Constantine and George. This is Zoe, here, seen here in a mosaic in Hagia Sophia, with Jesus with a very shroud-like face. So, Romanos' death was the reason that the Holy Mendelian was sent to de Lassanos. And John the Orphan, it didn't work well for de Lassanos. He said, okay, he'd seen the, I would say, image of Edessa, Holy Mendelian. He'd seen the shroud of Jesus Christ. So he said, okay, I'll come and serve Michael because he has this. Well, John the Orphanathrosis exiled him the minute he came back to Constantinople, sent him off in a boat. So are these images, one with the chest, one with the casket, one exiling, and one carrying, protecting, I would argue, the Holy Mendelian? So I think these two images once belonged together. This is the procession protected by the Varangian Guard of the Holy Shroud, folded into four when it was damaged by incense, with a thurible that didn't have a lid, going to the church of St. Mary Blanchenoy. Now, John had an association with St. Mary Blanchenoy. He had his nephew Michael V crowned there. What happened to John? Well, when Michael V's reign as emperor ended in 1042, he was blinded and sent to a monastery by Harold Hardrada. Harold Hardrada was a commander in the army of the Varangian Guard in the 1030s. Now, this is the axe. I just want to follow through. This is a very, very time-specific axe, middle of the 11th century, beginning of the 11th century to the middle of the 11th century. Okay, this is archaeological. This is in the Battle of Hastings. I don't know if you know British history, but King Harold II died with an arrow in his eye at the Battle of Hastings. And you can see on the Bear tapestry, here is the same axe. You see it with Harold Hardrada came to England to try and take the English throne. Here he is arriving, carrying the same axe. He's carrying the same axe here. This is his death, and you can see he's carrying the axe there as he's being stabbed by Harold II. Now, there's an American association here as well, because Olaf Tryggvason, Olaf I, King of Norway, he grew up in Novgorod under Vladimir the Great, but he became a Christian in England. This is him sending Leif Erikson as an explorer with the same Dane axe as an explorer to Greenland and Newfoundland. And this is an American stamp with Leif Erikson carrying the same axe that Harald Hardrada carried, that the Varangian Guard carried, while they're protecting the Holy Shroud of Jesus. And this is where they settled. This is a Viking settlement in the Americas, and it is nearly 500 years before Columbus. So the first Christians to come to America were Orthodox, and they probably had a knowledge of the image of Christ. Okay, Christ is the man of sorrows. I'm nearly finished now. This is another folding pattern for the shroud. We know that the shroud, the Holy Mandelion, went from the palace to the church of St. Mary Blanchennau, and at St. Mary Blanchennau it was raised every Friday night so that you could see the image of our Lord on it. This is a Christ of the Man of Sorrows image that I used yesterday from Cranach. But look at this. This is the Mass of St. Gregory. And you can see above the altar there's the Holy Mandelion image, and then there's the image of Christ rising. It's the same image, but the artist is showing the different developments, I think. And this is the transubstantiation. Have a look at this. This is the banner of Harold II in that image that I showed you. He's carrying the image of Christ rising from the grave. It's all over his horse. Now, Matthew Paris, who created this image, died in 1259, before the carbon date on the shroud, and he's drawing this image of Christ rising from the grave. So where did it go after that? Well, the sack of Constantinople. We know that the shroud went to Athens. Ian Wilson and Juliet Faith have argued that it was maybe stored in this container called the Temple Kumpanel, and it would have been stored in the manner of the Mandelion for that. Sorry, and then I'm nearly done, and then it went with the Knights Templar. So what I'm trying to say is all through its history it was protected by kings, by armies, by men who were strong, by the Harald Hardradas of this world. So here's the diamond water stains pattern. There's the image of Edessa. Here's the Limburg Starotiki. Here's the Epitasios, the incense burns, Christ as a man of sorrows, multiple folding patterns for the Shroud of Turin. Thank you for listening. If you managed to stay awake, any of you. Anyone got a question?
Leif Erikson didn't have any connection with the shroud, though, did he?
Well, he grew up in the court of Vladimir the Great, but he didn't become a Christian there. He became a Christian in England. But yeah, I mean, Vladimir the Great, Anna will have seen the shroud, in my opinion. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Where was the shroud prior to Odessa?
With Jesus, I would say. I mean, I think I've shown you evidence of the letter of Jesus to Abgar V. That was treated with huge respect. It was carrying the procession. You know what I mean? So I don't agree with Jack and Guy that it's Abgar the Great. I think it's Abgar V, because the autograph letter of Jesus to Abgar was treated with such respect. I mean, they sent an army to get it. Yeah.
Do we have any idea what happened to this letter?
No. I imagine a lot of these things disappeared with the sack of Constantinople. So I imagine that's where it went. But I mean, so there's a pilgrim, a British pilgrim, a woman called Egreria, who went from, I think, Britain to Jerusalem, and she went via Edessa in the 4th century, and she describes the letter of Jesus. She describes what was written in it. Yeah.
I'm going to confess my ignorance around how you even do this kind of work. I find it fascinating. But tell me a little bit about your research, how you do it, where do you find this information, how do you gather and synthesize it and put it together?
Well, no, well, it's been years. So it was quite by chance that somebody gave me a book with the Limburg Sarachiki in, because it was one of the great treasures that was struck out of Constantinople. And so I looked at it, and I looked at it in a bit more detail, and then I read the inscriptions, and the inscriptions are obviously about the shroud, in my opinion. And also, on the inscription, it says, the winding sheet of Jesus, you know what I mean? And then the Varangian Guard image, I just saw by chance. And it just struck me as an extraordinary image. So I bought Vasiliki's book, 250 quid. I don't know what that is in dollars, but it was very, very expensive. But it was a means to understand the text and the image. Now the images are all online, but in order to understand what the images are talking about, and it was just so obvious that this wasn't Leo II, you know, because it's like drawing a picture of the American army and putting it into the Battle of Gettysburg. It would not work. Do you know what I mean? It's that, you know, this army is very specific, and it wasn't there in 820. Yeah.
We were told yesterday that the shroud probably stayed in the Jerusalem church until about 68, which is probably the death of James,
Yeah.
sometime around that time. And then
Went to Antioch.
went to Odessa area, probably for protection, because the Jews still had built in 68, although they were in deep distress.
Okay.
But does that kind of agree with what you believe?
I would argue that it went with. I went earlier.
Pam, can you repeat the question, please?
Oh, sorry. Would you, Joe? Will you?
Let me just give him his microphone. Hold on.
Oh, I was asked about the timing of when the shroud would have left the early church.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the opinion that that Jesus sent it with the servant of the high priest, according to the Gospel of Hebrews, to Abgar.
And also there's a question about Judas Thaddeus would have been the disciple that was elected to take it
Yeah.
from the
Adai,
Jerusalem
or-
church on up to Odessa.
I think that's the Adai legend. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that's not what Jack or Guy say, but I'm inclined to believe. But partly because that's where I think that's where the image not made by hands was found. That's where St. John Damascene went to work out whether you're allowed to have icons anymore. And in fact, John asked me, some of the songs we still sing today, you know, like the Day of Resurrection, he wrote those. They're about the light of God, you know, and he was a witness to the image of Edessa. And also, like the Byzantine iconoclasm, I think if the shroud had been in Constantinople, like the image of Comuliana was allegedly, it would have been destroyed during the iconoclasm.
Well, I agree with that, but what I'm finding is that these conferences like this, in just a period of 3 days, we're hearing 2 or 3 different stories
I know.
from different
experts. And if the experts can't sit down and come to some conclusion, we're not going to get a conclusive.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that. But I do think that the evidence that comes out post 945 is so strong in terms of Constantine VII, in terms of the liturgy that he set up, in terms of the artwork that they created. I think they had the shroud.
Well, I agree with the later story. I was asking about the early.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I haven't followed Jack well enough now, but I thought he argued it was the image of Comuliana. If you look up the Wikipedia description of the image of Comuliana, I struggle to see how that works. But I don't want to criticize other, you know.
And I take it you believe in one facial cloth.
Yes. There was one miraculous cloth,
Okay.
which was, unlike
It went to Odessa, and then ultimately it went to
Constantinople.
And, and today is in Spain.
In
right?
Turin.
No, the facial cloth,
Oh, sorry, the sudarium, yes.
sudarium.
Yes, the sudarium. Yeah, no,
Oviedo.
I have no question about that.
Oviedo, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
and then we learned today that we have an expert that believes there are two facial cloths. All right, one that was used initially, applied at the time Christ was coming off the cross, probably kept on the face until he was taken to the tomb, at which time it was removed, and a second facial cloth was applied and then covered with the shroud. Now,
I mean, I think, I mean, I don't, in Jewish burial practices, they would sometimes cover the body with a talit, their prayer shawl. So I think it's conceivable that that happened. Still today, they would cover the body with a talit. So whether that, you know, but I don't know where that is.
and I think the reason for that story is because they believed the shroud needed to be tightly placed against the body, and able to do that on the face to keep the wrinkles out in the creases and the air pockets. They needed the facial cloth to tightly remove the open areas so that the shroud would then fit close up against the face, but
Yeah.
with the facial cloth underneath it, the second facial cloth underneath it.
Yeah, as I say, I don't know where. And I mean, if you look at what is the today, there's the Holy Shroud, there's the image of there's the sudarium, which has no image on it. I would argue there's the Holy Blood of Bruges, which was used to tie his hands together. But there is no, every other image is a painting by and large. I'm not a big fan of the Manapello image personally, but I know some people believe that's a miraculous image. There is the shroud. I think there's always just been the shroud, personally. But then, obviously, I realise I'm in a minority here.
I have a question. The shroud was originally called the mandolin.
No, it was always originally called the image of Edessa. Sorry, but carry on.
The image of Edessa.
Mm.
When did it become the mandolin? What does the mandolin mean?
The Holy Mandolin, well, it's just a term. I mean, I suppose it's supposed to mean face cloth, but so the Skylitzes, where they're obviously describing, in my opinion, I mean, he's drawing a picture, in my opinion, of the shroud folded into four, but he calls it the Holy Mandelion, not the image of Edessa. It's just a change of name that took place in the 11th century.
Okay, but what does mandolin mean? That's what I was
Well, I think Guy was saying it means a face cloth, but I know that sounds confusing, and maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot. But no, the thing is that it's about revelation. It's a naked image, you know, and I think bit by bit they opened it up to show little bits more of it until you get to the 14th century where they're prepared to show it, all of it. But, you know, it's little bits, so it's first just shown as the face. And then they, you know, add little bits more. They show it down to the hands, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. No.
Pam, there would be practices at the time. For example, you would be, if you were found with a burial cloth of a dead person with blood on it,
Yeah.
you'd be stoned to death.
Well, yeah, blood was, in Judaism is unclean, so taking it out of a Jewish context makes sense.
But
so,
that, yeah, that practice, though, was endemic in the entire Middle East. It wasn't just for Judaism.
Absolutely. So I struggle, sorry, forgive me, I don't want to criticize another Shroud scholar because I think they're brilliant, but, you know, we're all trying to do this together. We're all trying to love Jesus. We're all trying to love one another. But I don't believe the idea that St. Peter wore it.
Well, let me add one more thing, though. I have a cousin who married into the Chaldean Catholic Church, okay? Her brother-in-law was the Bishop of Babylon, believe it or not, okay? And when they say their masses, they actually claim Abgar as one of their saints, the way they would as one of the original followers of Jesus.
Yeah, do they? Wow.
Yes.
This is sorry, Tony's a Varangian guard. He's descended from the Kievan Rus. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you, that's helpful. Enough? I'm sorry if I bored you, Bridget.
You know, when you had the John Skylides, and it was a big, long shroud like. Okay.
Let's see if I can find it. The sky, which one? The skylitzes of this?
The long, yes, with the face on,
Oh, which one? The one with the, okay, of of Romanos.
Skylides with the long, and
Romanos
the
the
emperor,
first.
yes, he has his sandal off, and he's kissing the face of
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah.
But I found it a little strange that the part that he was kissing was white, and see, the shroud is
Yeah.
all, see,
Yeah.
the rest of it is pink.
Yeah.
And what is that head coming off of the pink?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's one of the reasons why I believe that two are the same image. What you get is this three-dimensional. So this is the image of Edessa arriving, but it's a three-dimensional head. Yeah? Okay, it's only just the fact, because it was only shown, it's a three-dimensional head. Now, this is quite an interesting construct, because can you see this bit here? This cloth that he's got around his shoulders is pink.
Right,
Yeah?
right.
That's about having veiled hands. If it's so holy, you can't touch it. You have to have veiled hands when you touch it. So that's why it's held in that way. The same thing is applied to the letter of Jesus to Abgar. It's carried on veiled hands back to Romanos III.
Okay. There's not it looks like a little like a fringe on the white.
Yeah, it's to show,
Yeah.
it's to denote that it's a cloth. It's not a, you know, like the Quranian was a tile. This is a cloth, so it's got a fringe drawn on it.
Okay, so is it part of the long shroud?
No, it's not. I mean, I thought that for a while, that maybe it's just, it's hinting that there's a longer cloth there. But no, that's the veiled cloth.
Okay.
But I think it is a hint that it's more.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. Pam, could it be that what we're looking at there is it shows a head that's the king is kissing, but could it be the face on the cloth itself? That
Yes.
the face was what was being exposed, and he was
Yes.
kissing the face
Yes.
on the cloth. It appears to be a 3D image, but the fact is that it was the cloth itself.
Of course, I would argue, yes, this is
venerating.
the image of Edessa being kissed. And the next day, Gregory Referendus talks about it being a... Yeah, no, I think that I would agree with you absolutely there. Hang on a sec, can I just... And if you have a look at the Skylitzes image of... sorry, that one, you can see it's, again, a three-dimensional image. And the image, I would say, of Christ, he's wearing the golden loris. This is not an emperor who's had... Okay, this is a redacted image because... It's a copy. This is not the original. It's a copy. The original is lost. And so they've drawn blood around the head to make it look like he's lost his head, but he's not. It's there. Do you see what I mean? And so I think this is the Holy Mandelion being carried. Because how did it get from the palace to St Mary Blanchenoy? How did it get there? From where the Crusaders saw it. Every Friday night raised every... It had to do that journey at some point, and I think this is when it did it.
Okay. If there are any more questions, you can see Pam out in the hall. Thank you, Pam.
I don't know. I think half of people were asleep.
Pam, I'm looking at my ancestors, the axe-bearing barbarians.
Yeah, no.